Hello everyone, and welcome to another match of Littlewargame. Today I am bringing you a game played on Ravaged AA4, with myself playing the blue pieces in the bottom right corner, and my opponent AJ playing the red pieces in the top right corner of the map. So I started this video a couple minutes into the game, and as you can see here, I've gone for my tried and true barracks play, going for those first two raiders, and then my opponent has gone for a for some beast play. So essentially, he went house into den, and then he went into fortress, and now he is getting his castle at this point. This is a very interesting decision to go for a fortress instead of going for a quicker castle potentially. So that'll be really interesting. At this point, I did see the fact that he had a wolf coming on the other, coming towards this side of the map. I didn't really mind it because I already knew I had another raider coming out. So I basically said, my raider is perfectly capable of taking care of any wolves. Whereas my raider on his side of the map killed one of his workers that was building that castle. And then I do end up losing this raider, sadly, due to the fact of having to micro and mismanage all over. So I lose a raider, he loses a worker, and a wolf. Overall, I think I should be better on the trade, but it is a scenario in which I think I could have definitely saved that raider and definitely would have had a little bit stronger raider harassment. Oh, really quickly, this was really interesting. I don't know if this is a glitch in the game, but throughout the game, the fact that my raider died, and I think my raider died mid blink, probably broke the game a little bit. So as you can see, I have this advantage where I can actually see what my opponent is doing because of this, and so that is going to make things kind of unfair. Sadly, it'll make things a little bit unfair, the fact that I know certain information when it comes up, and I'll address that in just a little bit. Obviously, I wish I didn't have that advantage because I would rather play a normal game, but I guess it just didn't happen. My opponent, he's got a Dragon's Lair coming up, so definitely trying to quickly go into dragons. At this point, I would much rather seen AJ, get more workers and go for a third base. At this point, especially with the fact that he knows that, my army is on the other side of the map, having to defend against this wolf harassment. So I definitely thought that's something my opponent could have tried to go for a little bit. Whereas for myself, I'm sticking on two bases for a little bit longer, with the idea of I'll be able to get this tech, I'll be able to defend against any shenanigans, and then now I will be able to expand and be able to deal with my opponent. So it's at this point I do end up saying the fact that he goes for workshops, and that doesn't necessarily mean that I transition into anything, but it does mean that I can stay a little bit more focused with my units at home compared to my opponent. My opponent, he is unaware of the fact that I'm going for a third base, but he does decide to go for this very strong army combination of workshop units as well as dragons, and it's pretty strong. So if you can play it the right way, it becomes very strong. A little bit of a supply block, but that should be taken care of by the time this castle builds up, and then I've got a house on the way. Two barracks. I think at this point I should be getting a third barrack. 2 or 3 more more barracks. Well, 1 or 2 more barracks. So that's something that I have in mind. Constantly just scouting with my raider, seeing if potentially he got a 3rd base just at this location, which it looks like is not the case in particular this time. While this is all going on, I decide I'm gonna try and test and see, how much strength my opponent has. I did know that he was going for units at home, but that means that earlier in the match he wasn't able to focus on building army because of the fact that he was producing structures throughout that time. So I essentially I will be able to kill some wolves, do a little bit of macro at home. So this is where I get my 3rd and 4th barrack so that I can produce more army units that I may need, and then approach my opponent's base at this point. I didn't go for a full-on attack. I think I realized at this point that he would have catapults, and so I tried not to overextend. Instead, what I do is I'm thinking my opponent is going to be very defended here at this location, so I basically try and wrap around and take an engagement from here where my opponent might not be as defended and a little bit more exposed. So that was my objective with that move. As we can see here, the information that I get is that my opponent has no 3rd base, and so I am definitely in a position of advantage. For myself, I do go for this attack, but I quickly realize that it's not a good attack to go for. My opponent is going to be able to devastate my units, and I don't have the damage to quickly win this engagement. So I decided to pull back slightly. While at the same time, as I was doing that move out, I go for this 4th base here. Hopefully I should be getting upgrades. I did see the fact that he did have dragons, and so at this point I decide to go for an advanced workshop, and actually 2 of them, just for that extra security, where I can make sure that I'll be safe from dragons at the very least. So that's essentially what's going on. For my opponent, AJ could have been getting a lot of value at this moment by having his dragons harass my base. At this particular moment, I am not prepared to fight dragons, and so I have to basically retreat and kind of reestablish everything that's going on. At this point, I really wish I would have been microing at home a little bit better. As you can see, I have been producing out of my buildings here, but I'm still floating a ton of resources, and now I try to unsupply cap myself, and I go for upgrades as well. So that should be very interesting. I also have ballista on the way, so that'll be very, very helpful. Once I get unsupply blocked, I'll be able to have ballista being produced, and able to deal with a large dragon threat that my opponent does have. The interesting thing is, how am I going to deal with the catapult threat? This large group of catapults is going to be very capable of destroying any ground army that I might have, and so it'll be very interesting to see how I try to deal with that. At this point, I basically trying to do as much damage as I can preliminary before this engagement goes full on. And as you can see here, I'm having to really micro and split and try to get as close to my opponent's units as close as possible while moving and splitting my army, so that I can take the least amount of damage as possible. And so that is where I get into this interesting situation of having to deal with this. At this point, my units, split pretty good, because there's this concave, and my opponents won't be able to get a massive, effect on that concave. At the same time, going for upgrades, he does back off this attack, which allows me some space to get some more barracks, as well as I have plenty of extra money, so I think I decide here to go for a 5th base as well. Currently, I might not be able to defend it. Oh, but I did get these airships, and I basically drop on his army. I wish I could go back in time and show you exactly how that ended up happening. But yes, I did take these airships, and I did drop on his army. At the same time, I should be building some more ballista at this point to deal with this additional dragon threat, which I do. And as we can see here, I've got 8 barracks worth of production versus my opponent's 2 workshops and about to be 3 dragon lairs. So it would be very interesting to see what occurs. Also, another interesting thing about these airships is that I think the AI or whatever maybe not the AI, but the scripting in this game makes it so that units want to attack the airship before they attack anything else. At least that's what I've seen in previous matches. And so it's interesting to have like some of these airships be soaking damage and things like such. This was a mistake by myself. The fact that I had 8 barracks of production worth, but the fact that I didn't have these 4 barracks rallied, it basically means that I'm going to be defending my my base with only 4 barracks worth of production instead of the 8 that I could have had at this particular moment. Kill a dragon. Killing dragons is very important. Constantly producing. At this point, I'm feeling very behind, but I'm dishing damage with my archers, which are constantly being upgraded at this point. Oh, I ran out of resources here, so I'm transferring them to my 5th base, moving my archers around. I did a little bit of run by harassment through that whole thing, and Arjay pulled his workers to try and defend against that just a little bit earlier ago. But at this point, I have what I feel like a good combination of units to really defend against this. They're not too clumped. This is a little bit clumped, but now the catapult should only be doing damage to individual units instead of clumps of units. And with the loss of this army, I definitely feel like Arjay rather will definitely be very undefended at home. I think it's at this point that I realized that I had like so many units pulled back, because I basically went to macro mode and wanted to manage all my bases and make sure I was good, and then I saw the fact that I had this massive army that was being produced that I just had no idea what was going on. And so I basically decided to use it. I'm going to use these units to basically form up and attack my opponent's armies. And so as you can see, this is what's going on at this particular moment. Being able to approach my opponent's base with this massive army. And so if I could have learned anything from this game, it's that, for my opponent, was that he definitely needed to go for a 3rd base. Like at this point, I'm on 5 bases, 4 technically because this one isn't mining. And, he had a great army composition, but the fact that I was able to waste time with that raider before his wolves approached, or or the fact that I got time to build these advanced workshops before he did any like harassment damage with his dragons really meant that I had every opportunity to prepare for a potential fight against my opponent. And so I want to say very well played. I thought that was a very fun match. I was definitely on the back foot for a little bit of that, in the sense of I was having to defend it instead of like being aggressive and having to attack. But eventually, I just got too strong from how much economy I was able to get versus the economy of my opponent. So if you enjoyed that video, please leave a like. Please subscribe because I make daily little war game videos all the time. And so if this is something you enjoy watching, go ahead and leave a like, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, guys. Bye-bye.